When an arrogant pilot assumed the distinguished black doctor didn't belong in first class, he tried to humiliate him. But one viral moment later, the captain's career was in free fall. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Dr. Walter Jenkins checked his watch as he made his way through the bustling terminal of Chicago O'Hare International Airport. At 72, the distinguished cardiologist had seen his fair share of airports over his illustrious career, but today's journey was personal. He was flying to attend his granddaughter's medical school graduation in Boston. Despite the special occasion, his arthritic knee was acting up, making him grateful for the first-class ticket his daughter had insisted on purchasing. As he approached the priority boarding line, Dr. Jenkins adjusted his tie and straightened his well-worn but impeccably maintained suit jacket. The boarding agent smiled warmly, scanned his ticket, and welcomed him aboard. He nodded appreciatively and made his way down the jet bridge, his ornate cane, a gift from his late wife, tapping softly against the floor with each step. Entering the aircraft, Dr. Jenkins was greeted by a flight attendant who directed him to his seat in the first row. As he carefully stored his small carry-on in the overhead compartment, he could feel the stares of other passengers boarding behind him. He was used to it. Being one of the few black men in predominantly white spaces had been the story of his life since becoming one of the first black cardiologists at Massachusetts General in the 1970s. Captain James Mercer was having a terrible morning. His divorce papers had been served yesterday, his request for the Florida route had been denied, and now he was running late for pre-flight checks. As he strode through first class toward the cockpit in his crisp uniform adorned with 4 stripes, he noticed Dr. Jenkins settling into seat 1A. Something about the older man's presence in first class triggered something in Mercer. Perhaps it was the stress of his crumbling personal life. Perhaps it was deep-seated prejudices he normally kept hidden. Whatever the reason, Captain Mercer stopped abruptly beside Dr. Jenkins's seat. "Excuse me, sir," Captain Mercer said loudly, his voice carrying across the cabin as other first-class passengers boarded. "I believe you may be in the wrong section. The economy boarding is through the rear entrance." Dr. Jenkins looked up, momentarily confused. "I'm sorry?" The captain's voice grew more condescending. "This is first class. Your boarding pass must have directed you to the wrong seat. Let me have a flight attendant help you find your proper place." The cabin fell silent. Several passengers stopped in the aisle, witnessing the interaction with uncomfortable expressions. Dr. Jenkins's face remained composed, though a flicker of hurt crossed his eyes. "Young man," Dr. Jenkins responded calmly, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I believe I'm exactly where my ticket indicates I should be." He extended his boarding pass toward the captain. Captain Mercer barely glanced at the boarding pass. His face flushed with embarrassment, but rather than apologize, he doubled down. "There must be some mistake," he insisted. "Perhaps you were upgraded by mistake. We need this seat for what, exactly?" came a sharp voice from behind them. Samantha Chen, the head flight attendant with 15 years of experience, stepped forward. Her professional demeanor couldn't quite mask her shock at what she was witnessing. "Captain Mercer, Dr. Jenkins is a platinum member and frequently flies. First class with us," she said firmly. "His reservation is in order." Captain Mercer's face reddened further. "You know this passenger?" "Of course," Samantha replied. "Dr. Jenkins is one of our most valued customers." She turned to Dr. Jenkins. "I apologize for this confusion, Doctor. Can I get you a pre-flight beverage while you settle in?" Several passengers had their phones subtly raised, recording the interaction. One woman in the second row, a marketing executive from Atlanta, was already typing furiously on her phone, her outrage evident on her face. Among the first-class passengers was Senator Robert Kellerman, heading back to Washington after a fundraiser. He'd been watching the scene unfold with growing dismay. As Captain Mercer turned to retreat to the cockpit, the senator cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Captain," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of his position. "I believe you owe this gentleman an apology." Captain Mercer froze, recognizing the senator immediately. The cabin was now completely silent, all eyes on the unfolding drama. I was just following protocol," Mercer stammered unconvincingly. Dr. Jenkins raised a hand gently. "It's fine. I'm sure the captain is very busy with his pre-flight duties. I wouldn't want to delay our departure." His dignity, in the face of humiliation, only made the captain look worse. Several passengers shook their heads in disgust. The woman who had been typing on her phone finished posting something, then leaned over to Dr. Jenkins. "Sir, I just want you to know that what just happened was completely unacceptable," she said. "I've already contacted the airline's corporate office through my connections there." By the time the flight reached cruising altitude, the video of the confrontation had begun circulating on social media. The hashtag #AshaRespectDrJenkins was trending nationwide, with thousands sharing their own experiences with discrimination in travel. In the cockpit, Captain Mercer received a message from air traffic control. Upon landing, he was to report immediately to the airline's regional director. His co-pilot remained coldly professional throughout the flight, avoiding eye contact whenever possible. Meanwhile, in first class, Dr. Jenkins was being treated like royalty. Passengers stopped by to introduce themselves and express their support. Senator Kellerman shared stories about his own grandfather who had faced similar discrimination in the 1960s. A young black medical student recognized Jenkins from his pioneering research and asked for a picture together. When the flight landed in Boston, Dr. Jenkins was surprised to find his daughter, Layla, waiting at the gate rather than at baggage claim. Her expression was a mixture of concern and fury. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, embracing him tightly. "It's all over the internet. The airline's CEO has already issued a statement." Captain James Mercer sat stiffly in the regional director's office, watching as Janet Williams, the airline's chief diversity officer, reviewed the footage that had now been viewed over 3 million times. "Do you understand what you've done?" the regional director asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Not only have you humiliated a distinguished passenger based apparently on nothing but the color of his skin, but you've also violated company policy, created a PR nightmare, and potentially exposed us to a discrimination lawsuit." Captain Mercer stared at his hands. "I didn't mean to—" "It doesn't matter what you meant," Janet interrupted. "What matters is what you did, and what you did was unconscionable." On the director's desk sat an open folder containing Dr. Jenkins' passenger profile, platinum elite status, over 2 million lifetime miles, and a note that he had received a humanitarian award from the airline 5 years ago for performing emergency life-saving surgery on a passenger during a flight to Tokyo. "Effective immediately, you are suspended pending investigation," the director announced. "Your pilot's license will be reviewed by the Aviation Authority, and sensitivity training will be mandatory before any potential reinstatement would even be considered." Captain Mercer's 20-year career was effectively over. 2 weeks after the incident that had sparked nationwide outrage, Dr. Walter Jenkins found himself in the warm embrace of family celebration. His daughter Layla's spacious Boston home was filled with the aroma of home-cooked food and the laughter of 3 generations gathered to honor his granddaughter Aisha's achievement. The glossy red diploma holder from Harvard Medical School sat prominently on the mantelpiece, catching the late afternoon sunlight that streamed through the bay windows. For Dr. Jenkins, this moment represented the culmination of a family legacy that had begun when he'd broken barriers decades ago, a legacy of excellence, perseverance, and dignity in the face of adversity. As relatives and friends mingled around him, Dr. Jenkins settled into his favorite armchair, the same one Layla always reserved for him during family gatherings. His knee had been giving him less trouble today, perhaps responding to the joy that permeated the atmosphere. He watched with quiet pride as Aisha moved through the room, confidently discussing her upcoming residency in cardiology. following in her grandfather's footsteps while blazing her own trail. Unlike his experience as the only black cardiologist in his department for many years, Aisha would be joining a more diverse medical community, though challenges certainly remained. The notification sound from his phone momentarily pulled Dr. Jenkins away from the scene before him. Opening the email, he found a message from Patricia Winters, the airline's CEO, personally informing him that the company had made a substantial donation of $500,000 to the scholarship fund he had established 20 years ago for minority medical students. The fund, which had already helped more than 40 promising young doctors complete their education without crippling debt, would now be able to support twice as many students in the coming years. The airline had also announced a new company-wide training protocol bearing his name, the Jenkins Initiative for Inclusive Excellence, designed to address unconscious bias and promote respectful engagement across all levels of the organization. Dr. Jenkins felt a complex mix of emotions as he read the email. While he appreciated the tangible outcomes that had emerged from his humiliating experience, he took no pleasure in knowing that Captain Mercer's career had been effectively terminated. The media had been relentless in their coverage, with the video of the incident accumulating over 15 million views across various platforms. Public opinion had overwhelmingly condemned the captain's actions, with many calling for even harsher penalties than the suspension and review he currently faced. As Dr. Jenkins reflected on these developments, Aisha approached and sat beside him on the adjacent cushion of the oversized chair they had often shared during her childhood. Now a poised young doctor herself, she still leaned against her grandfather's shoulder in the familiar way she had since she was small. "Grandpa, have you seen this?" she asked, handing him her tablet displaying a petition on change.org with over 200,000 signatures. The petition, started by a flight attendants advocacy group, called for specific conditions for Captain Mercer's potential reinstatement, a personal apology to Dr. Jenkins, completion of extensive community service in underserved communities, and participation in developing anti-bias training materials based on the incident. Dr. Jenkins adjusted his reading glasses and carefully read through the petition, noting the passionate comments left by supporters. Many shared their own experiences with discrimination while traveling, creating a tapestry of similar stories that stretched across generations, geographic regions, and varied professions. The comment section had become something of a communal testimony to the persistent reality of racial bias in spaces where power dynamics could easily be leveraged against people of color, regardless of their accomplishments, status, or contributions to society. After several minutes of thoughtful consideration, Dr. Jenkins set the tablet down on the side table and turned toward his granddaughter. The living room lights caught the silver in his hair as he shifted, highlighting the distinguished features that had commanded respect in hospital boardrooms and international medical conferences throughout his career. His expression was contemplative, embodying the measured wisdom that had guided him through countless difficult situations. "You know," he said to Aisha, his voice carrying the warm timbre that had comforted patients and family alike for decades, "in my 45 years as a doctor, I learned that humiliation never heals anything. That young man made a terrible mistake. But destroying his life won't fix what's broken in our society." He paused, watching as several family members drifted closer, sensing the importance of the conversation. Dr. Jenkins had always been the moral center of their family, the one whose perspective they sought during challenges. His son-in-law, Marcus, a civil rights attorney, leaned against the doorframe, listening intently. "When I started at Massachusetts General in 1974, Dr. Jenkins continued, there was an attending physician, Dr. Harold Lambert, who made it abundantly clear he didn't believe I belonged there. For months, he questioned my diagnoses in front of patients, assigned me the most difficult cases hoping I'd fail, and accidentally left me off important email communications." Several family members nodded, having heard pieces of this story before. But Aisha's younger cousins leaned forward, captivated by this glimpse into their grandfather's professional journey. One night, Dr. Lambert's son was brought into the ER with a severe arrhythmia, a condition I had recently published research on. I was the attending cardiologist on call, and despite our history, I provided the best care possible. I stayed with his son throughout the night, implementing a treatment protocol I had developed that ultimately saved the young man's life. Dr. Jenkins reached for the glass of water on the side table, took a sip, and continued. The next day, Dr. Lambert approached me in the doctor's lounge. I expected perhaps a grudging thank you at best. Instead, he broke down completely. He apologized for months of mistreatment and confessed that his behavior stemmed from insecurities about his own outdated knowledge and fear of change. That moment transformed our relationship. By the time he retired 5 years later, he had become one of my strongest advocates in the department and a genuine friend. The room had grown quiet. The earlier celebration momentarily paused as family members absorbed the story. Dr. Jenkins's daughter Layla wiped away a tear, recognizing how rarely her father spoke about the obstacles he had overcome. The lesson I learned, Dr. Jenkins said, reaching for his phone, was that transformation requires opportunity. Captain Mercer made a terrible mistake, one that revealed biases he might not have even recognized within himself. But permanently, removing him from his profession doesn't create change. It merely satisfies our collective desire for punishment. With deliberate movements that belied his age, Dr. Jenkins began composing an email to the airline's CEO. The family watched respectfully, as his fingers moved across the screen, occasionally pausing as he carefully selected his words. In the message, he requested a meeting with Captain Mercer, not for an apology, but for a conversation about growth, understanding, and the kind of meaningful change that could turn an ugly moment into something transformative. Dr. Jenkins proposed a different approach. Rather than Captain Mercer performing community service as a punitive measure, he suggested a collaborative project where both he and the captain would work together to develop training materials based on their shared experience. He outlined a vision for a program that would acknowledge the reality of bias while creating pathways toward genuine understanding across racial and generational divides. The approach would emphasize accountability without humiliation, learning without defensiveness, and healing without denying harm. Sometimes, Dr. Jenkins told his granddaughter as he pressed send, his voice carrying across the now silent living room, the best response to ignorance isn't punishment, but education. And sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is offering someone the dignity they failed to give you. Aisha squeezed her grandfather's hand, her eyes bright with pride and understanding. As a new doctor entering a profession still navigating issues of representation and equity, she recognized the profound wisdom in his approach. "That's why you're the best doctor I know," she said softly. "You always treat the disease, not just the symptoms." Marcus, her father and Dr. Jenkins's son-in-law, stepped forward from his position by the doorway. "Walter, do you really think someone capable of that kind of public disrespect deserves a second chance?" he asked, his legal mind naturally inclined toward questions of justice and accountability. Dr. Jenkins considered the question seriously before responding. "It's not about what he deserves, Marcus. It's about what kind of world we want to build. Throughout my career, I've seen how shame often drives people deeper into their prejudices rather than freeing them from such limitations. If Captain Mercer is truly remorseful and willing to do the difficult internal work required, his experience could make him a powerful advocate for change within an industry that clearly needs it." The conversation expanded throughout the evening, with family members sharing different perspectives on forgiveness, accountability, and structural change. Dr. Jenkins listened more than he spoke, appreciating the thoughtful engagement across 3 generations. Later that evening, he received a response from the airline CEO expressing profound gratitude for his approach and committing to facilitate the meeting he had proposed. 3 days later, in a private room at the airline's regional headquarters, Dr. Jenkins came face to face with Captain James Mercer. The younger man looked markedly different from their first encounter. His confident posture replaced by the slumped shoulders of someone whose entire identity had been shaken. When he met Dr. Jenkins's gaze, his eyes revealed genuine remorse alongside fear and uncertainty about his future. What transpired in that room would later become the foundation for a case study used in corporate training programs nationwide. Their conversation, difficult, honest, and ultimately transformative, demonstrated the possibility of growth even from the most shameful moments. Captain Mercer would eventually return to flying, though not before spending 6 months working alongside Dr. Jenkins to develop training materials that would impact thousands of airline employees. Outside Layla's home that spring afternoon, as the family celebration continued, the setting sun cast long shadows across the well-maintained garden where Dr. Jenkins had taught Aisha to identify medicinal plants as a child. The incident at the airport had now become just another story in Dr. Jenkins' remarkable life, a life defined not by the disrespect he sometimes faced, but by the respect he unfailingly gave to others, and by his unwavering belief that healing was always possible, even from the deepest wounds of prejudice and misunderstanding.